Welcome to Weekly News Highlights. Let's begin with the keywords that made headlines this week. As U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping met in Beijing, and tension centered on how the two sides could make progress on trade and other key issues. President Lee Jae-myung has called for expanded government spending to be reflected in this year's and next year's budgets, saying fiscal stimulus is needed to revive the economy. With less than 1 month until South Korea's local elections, the rival parties have unveiled their key campaign pledges. The ruling Democratic Party of Korea is emphasizing regional development, while the main opposition People Power Party is focusing on housing. As U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping met in Beijing, attention was focused on how the two leaders could ease trade tensions and make progress on broader geopolitical issues.
The summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping ended on Friday with a symbolic gesture at the walled-off Songnanhai complex. The two had lunch and tea at the special venue, and President Xi offered a rare glimpse into the private imperial gardens, a gesture typically reserved for China's closest allies. Both leaders characterized the three-day visit as a fundamental shift in bilateral ties. President Trump praised the personal rapport he has built with his counterpart over the last decade, suggesting their chemistry has allowed them to bypass traditional diplomatic gridlock.
And we've settled a lot of different problems that other people wouldn't have been able to settle. And the relationship is a very strong one.
So far, we have established a new bilateral relationship, or rather a constructive relationship of strategic stability. This could be described as a milestone visit.
On the economic front, President Trump indicated that he is returning to Washington with significant progress toward fantastic trade deals. In an interview with Fox News, Trump described President Xi as all business, noting a pragmatic commitment to economic coordination. The U.S. leader said China has committed to major purchases of American goods, including a large order of Boeing aircraft and a significant increase in imports of U.S. agricultural products, specifically soybeans, while gradually opening parts of its economy to U.S. businesses. To manage these ongoing economic ties, the two sides have agreed to establish a new Board of Trade to handle disputes without immediately resorting to new tariffs. However, no joint statement or declaration was adopted by the two leaders for this trip. The two will meet again this year, as on Thursday, Trump invited Xi to the U.S. in September. Kim Do-yeon, ArirangNews.
Ahead of Thursday's high-stakes summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing, President Lee Jae-myung met separately with top economic officials from both countries at the Blue House on Wednesday. Our top office correspondent Song Yujin reports.
A day before the highly anticipated summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping, President Lee Jae-myung met with senior officials from both countries at the Blue House. Lee held talks with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, marking their second meeting following their first in New York last September. As widely expected, Seoul's pledged $350 billion investment package in exchange for lower U.S. tariffs was among the issues discussed.
President Lee asked Secretary Bessent to help ensure that the investment agreement leads to broader cooperation in key economic and strategic sectors based on the strong trust between Seoul and Washington, creating mutual benefits for both countries.
The two sides also agreed on the need to strengthen cooperation in supply chains and the foreign exchange market at a time of growing global uncertainties. Just before that, President Lee met with Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng. Lee's back-to-back meetings came ahead of trade talks between He and Bessent aimed at coordinating key issues before the Trump-Xi summit in Beijing.
President Lee said stable ties between the United States and China would greatly contribute to the development and prosperity of countries around the world, including Korea. Vice Premier He expressed appreciation for Korea's support in hosting the talks.
When asked why the trade talks were being held in Korea this time, Kang said the negotiations could be viewed as an effort to advance and finalize discussions from the previous Trump-Xi summit in Busan last October. On bilateral ties, President Yi asked the Chinese vice premier to play an active role in maintaining close communication in areas including the economy and culture. He in turn said he would do his utmost to ensure the smooth implementation of agreements reached during the two summits between Presidents Yi and Xi. With Seoul maintaining its alliance with Washington while also preserving its strategic cooperative partnership with Beijing, Wednesday's meetings could be viewed as its delicate balancing act between the world's two superpowers. 송유진, 아리랑뉴스.
President Lee Jae-myung is calling for bigger government spending, saying now is the time to use fiscal stimulus to revive the economy. He has urged officials to incorporate expansionary budget plans into both this year's and next year's economic policy. Our Blue House correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
Making more investments to prop up economic growth. That was what President Lee Jae-myung called for on Tuesday at the Cabinet/Emergency Economic Meeting as he assessed that the current conditions constitute an emergency that requires expansionary fiscal policy.
절약이 미덕일 때가 있었습니다. 안 쓰고 아끼고 저축하고 막 허리띠 졸라매고. 그러나 지금은 소비가 미덕인 시대입니다.
As he noted the economic impact of the consumption vouchers distributed last year, the president urged officials to ensure that active fiscal policy is reflected in the growth strategy plan for the latter half of the year, as well as next year's budget planning. He said critics calling for government belt-tightening were irresponsible and were turning a blind eye to people's hardships.
포퓰리즘적인 긴축 재정론의 함정에 빠져서는 안 됩니다. 적극적 재정을 통해서 내수를 활성화하고 또 경제 성장률과 GDP 자체를 높이면 분모가 커져가지고 국가 부채 비율은 오히려 떨어집니다.
Lee said South Korea's net debt amounts to around 10% of its GDP, adding that its debt structure is sturdier than its global peers. He was referring to last month's IMF fiscal monitor. Economic challenges were prominent, such as addressing what the president called predatory financing, citing certain cases where low-income borrowers were being exploited by what are called bad banks. All this as tensions in the Middle East show no clear sign of ending. South Korea continues its efforts to cushion the impact on the economy, while at the same time bracing for a renewed economic order after the war. Yoon Jung-min, ArirangNews.
President Lee Jae-myung visited a major shipyard, highlighting shipbuilding as a key growth industry for South Korea. He called for stronger competitiveness and a system that ensures the benefits are shared more broadly. Our Blue House correspondent Yoon Jung-min has the details.
Hitting the road on Wednesday to the country's southeastern city of Ulsan, President Lee Jae-myung toured a shipyard where LNG carriers are built. Meeting with shipbuilders, he noted growing recognition of South Korea's shipbuilding industry on the global stage.
국제적인 관심도가 높아지다가 소위 마스가라고 미국의 대규모 투자 사업의 핵심 아이템으로 조선 산업이 또 선정돼 있기도 합니다. 앞으로 이 부분은 매우 여러 가지 많은 가능성과 잠재력을 가지고 있는데.
He was looking for what the government can do to help, noting a great discrepancy during times of a boom and recession, which also affects the livelihoods of workers in the field. The president called for creating a fair compensation system.
그 성장의 과실들이 골고루 좀 나눠지고 또 회사 내에서도 사용자와 노동자가 함께 그 과실을 누릴 수 있는 그런 시스템을 만드는 것도 중요한 일일 것 같습니다.
High on the agenda was raising its competitiveness amid a fierce global race.
If China excels in the LNG carrier sector, it's hard for us to catch up. We own the building technology, but what's key is demonstration, especially for large vessels.
Some have called for more support in financing.
Smaller shipbuilders like us have no choice but to give up major contracts because we couldn't get a refund guarantee.
Present were major and smaller shipbuilders alike, representatives of workers in the field, and financial institutions. After the session, President Lee toured an exhibition booth showcasing robots and cutting-edge technologies applied in the shipbuilding sector. Yoon Jung-min, ArirangNews.
The combat-ready KF-21, Korea's homegrown fighter jet, has started mass production and is soon to be delivered to the ROK Air Force. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung had a peek inside the mass production site.
The KF-21, a South Korean-made 4.5 generation supersonic fighter. At this site in Sacheon, Gyeongsangnam-do Province, around 20 KF-21 fighter jets are currently being assembled. The KF-21 Borame was first envisioned by then-President Kim Dae-jung in 2001, who dreamed of developing an advanced domestically built fighter jet. The program officially entered the development phase in December 2015 and then underwent 5 years of ground testing from 2021 until February this year. During the testing, the jet completed more than 1,600 test flights without a single accident and passed roughly 13,000 test conditions.
This homegrown KF-21 fighter jet is being prepared for its flight test. After more than 10 years in development, South Korea plans to deliver the first mass-produced aircraft to the Air Force in September.
The CEO of Korea Aerospace Industries underlined how despite initial doubts from the likes of Lockheed Martin, the country was able to make the development a success. Now he dreams of exporting hopefully up to 1,000 jets, with already around 200 potential export orders. As Korea becomes the 8th country to produce its own supersonic jet fighters, the KF-21 is also expected to greatly boost the K-defense industry as a whole.
The introduction of South Korea's independently developed KF-21 will go beyond replacing aging fighters like F-4 and F-5. It will open up a new era of self-reliant defense and be a starting point of a stronger military defense industry ecosystem.
With the Air Force Chief of Staff having promised to bring forward the F-5's retirement from 2030 to 2027, KF-21 is soon to become one of the Air Force's core assets. Kim Bo-kyung, ArirangNews, Sacheon.
With less than 3 weeks left until the local elections, the main political parties have announced their election pledges. For more details, we have our National Assembly correspondent An Sung-jin with us in the studio. Welcome, Sung-jin.
My pleasure to be here, Soo-jin.
Right, so the National Election Commission has released election pledges for both the ruling and the main opposition parties. So let's start with the ruling party. So what were some of their key election pledges?
So the two words regional development, that's what the ruling Democratic Party has been emphasizing for its election campaign, announcing balanced national development as its top campaign pledge. What this entails is strengthening local governments and reducing economic concentration in the capital area. Now, key proposals include completing their mega district initiative, which includes a 5 mega regions, 3 special autonomous provinces framework aimed at boosting region-led growth while expanding fiscal authority and autonomy for local governments. The party also outlined broader economic and social initiatives, including fostering advanced industries such as AI and biotechnology and supporting youth employment. Additional pledges include expanding childcare and easing the financial burden that households face amid inflation and currency volatility. The party also pledged to move forward with plans to establish Sejong as the nation's administrative capital by building a National Assembly branch office and a presidential office there during its administration. The DP said it would push legal and institutional reforms with major budget measures reflected from the 2027 fiscal year.
All right, then what about the main opposition party? What have they unveiled as their main election pledge?
Right, so for them, solving housing crisis is the main message for the main opposition People Power Party. So unlike the DP's regional development, the PPP has made housing stability and economic deregulation its top election pledge to address the housing crisis. The party proposed expanding the so-called half-price jeonse housing in Seoul and surrounding metropolitan areas, which entails offering long-term leased housing at roughly 50% of market rates while providing broader tax benefits for renters. To increase housing supply, it promised to ease redevelopment and reconstruction regulations. Now, the PPP further emphasized industrial growth, including incentives to encourage overseas Korean companies to relocate production back home in what it calls a Korean Inflation Reduction Act. Pledges focused on young adults include expanded rent support and extended tax cuts for young workers employed at small and medium-sized enterprises. The party also proposed measures aimed at boosting disposable income for workers, including indexing income, tax brackets to inflation, expanding education-related tax deductions, and introducing more flexible dividend payment systems.
I see. So how is the rest of the election schedule expected to unfold?
Right, so following the 2-day official registration period, which just ended on Friday, official campaigning will begin on May 21st and last for 13 days. Now, during this period, candidates will take part in street rallies, televised debates, and policy-focused events aimed at persuading undecided voters. Early voting is scheduled for May 29th and 30th, allowing voters to cast ballots anywhere in the country with valid identification. The main election will take place on June 3rd, with vote counting beginning immediately after polls close. The competing pledges highlight a clear divide in priorities, and as both parties unveil ambitious policy agendas, we will have to keep an eye on where voters will weigh in as campaigning intensifies in the upcoming weeks.
So I guess it looks like the next few weeks will be very critical. So thank you so much for your coverage today, Sungjin.
Thanks for having me, Sujin.
Surging oil prices amid the Middle East conflict are fueling inflation concerns in South Korea. A new report warns that prolonged disruptions could drive consumer prices sharply higher. Our economics correspondent Kim Do-yeon tells us more.
Korea is facing severe inflationary threats as global oil prices surge amid the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. As of early Monday for Korea, Brent crude was trading at around $105 per barrel, while Dubai crude was trading at $97 a barrel. The sustained geopolitical tension has left critical waterways like the Strait of Hormuz effectively paralyzed, severely disrupting global energy supply chains. The physical blockade of shipping routes is hitting the Korean economy harder than a conventional supply shortage. According to a report released on Monday by the Korea Development Institute, a 10% rise in oil prices driven by transport uncertainty pushes domestic consumer inflation up by 0.20 percentage points. This is nearly double the 0.11 percentage point impact observed during standard market fluctuations. The domestic economy remains highly vulnerable, relying on the Middle East for about 70% of its crude imports. The KDI warns that if Dubai crude sustains an average of $105 a barrel, South Korea could see consumer inflation rise by 1.6 percentage points this year. Under this prolonged high price scenario, the inflationary impact would persist, potentially adding 1.8 percentage points to consumer prices in 2027. The economic effects are not limited to petroleum products. The KDI emphasizes that transport-driven oil shocks demonstrate higher persistence, spilling over into core inflation by raising costs for non-petroleum industrial goods and services.
This analysis does not factor in the government's policy responses, such as price caps and fuel tax cuts. If these measures are taken into account, they are expected to mitigate the overall impact on consumer prices.
While the government's recent fuel tax cuts and price caps have provided a temporary buffer, long-term price stability remains tightly linked to the resolution of the Middle East crisis. Kim Do-yeon, ArirangNews.
As one of the world's fastest aging societies, South Korea is turning to artificial intelligence to help care for its growing elderly population. For older adults living alone, AI can serve as both an emergency lifeline and a daily companion. Kim Jin-young shows us how.
혹시 밤새 잠은 편안히 주무셨어요?
네, 잘 잤습니다.
For 77-year-old Jung Yuni, a daily conversation now comes from an unexpected companion, artificial intelligence. The care call service Talking Buddy, developed by Neighbor Cloud for the elderly, once helped save Jung's life. Just as Jung was suffering severe stomach pain alone at home, the AI called to check on her. After saying she was in pain, an ambulance soon arrived, allowing her to undergo emergency surgery for an acute hernia.
To me, it is a blessing in my life. Doctors told me it could have become very serious if I hadn't gotten surgery that day. I don't get to talk with my family very often, so I can't always share my day with them. But with AI, I can. It listens, responds to me, and that brings me joy.
This AI call service keeps in touch with older people living alone, with many of them struggling with illness or loneliness. It aims to build lasting relationships through memory-based conversations, tailored to each person's daily life. Conversations with the AI are monitored by staff at care centers. Most calls are screened by the AI itself, but missed calls or signs of unusual behavior are classified as potential risks. Human supervisors then step in to contact the individual directly and respond if necessary.
In April, a woman in her 70s said during a call that she had been assaulted by her husband. The AI identified it as a warning, and staff later reported it as suspected elder abuse.
People aged 65 and older in Korea are expected to make up 21.6% of the population this year, with the figure projected to exceed 40% by 2050. But the caregiving workforce is struggling to keep pace with the country's rapidly aging population. Korea is expected to need an additional 990,000 care workers by 2043 just to keep up with current demand. AI technology is now emerging as a solution to help fill that gap.
Care in the past was largely reactive, stepping in only when help was needed. But now, it is shifting toward a more proactive approach, using daily data to detect risks early and connect people with support. With that, AI is expected to become a key part of the digital safety net.
With its population aging at an unprecedented pace, Korea is embracing AI technology as a new part of everyday caregiving. Kim Jun-ong, ArirangNews.
Gyeongbokgung Palace is welcoming visitors after dark, offering a rare chance to experience the royal palace under the spring night sky. The nighttime opening combines illuminated architecture, hanbok, and cultural performances.
As the sun sets over the city, Gyeongbokgung Palace begins to glow beneath the spring night sky. Passing through Gwanghwamun Gate, the sounds of the city soften into a peaceful landscape, where history, nature, and the beauty of Korea's royal architecture come together. Wearing colorful hanbok, visitors wander around the illuminated palace grounds, creating unforgettable memories beneath the gentle lights of the palace.
We were thinking about what to do for our 500th day anniversary. And then we heard that Gyeongbokgung Palace was opening at night, so we decided to come here together. There were so many hanbok rental shops nearby, and my girlfriend likes pink colors, so we chose matching outfits in this style.
My sister made the reservation, so I came here right after work. Since it's spring and the weather is so nice, seeing the lanterns and everything with my child is creating such a wonderful memory.
As the night falls, visitors can see landmarks like Keunjeongjeon Hall and the Gyeonghaeru Pavilion from a new perspective. Along the quiet palace path, the architecture and shimmering reflections across the water create a calm and breathtaking atmosphere. Further inside, visitors can also step into parts of the palace that are usually off limits, like Gyotaejeon Hall, once the queen's living quarters, offering a rare glimpse into royal life during the Joseon dynasty. This is Keunjeongjeon Hall, the grandest and most iconic part of Gyeongbokgung Palace and its main attraction. Seeing the palace lit by beautiful night illuminations in the heart of Seoul, it feels like taking a journey back in time through the 500-year history of Joseon dynasty. The Gyeongbokgung Palace night opening invites visitors to the royal palace after dark through June 14. Only 3,300 guests each evening can step into this nighttime journey, with an admission fee of 3,000 won, while children under 6, seniors aged 65 and older, and visitors dressed in hanbok can enter free of charge.
It's a cool experience of taking pictures, just wandering around the palace because it's a really nice historical site of South Korea, and we're just having fun.
The nighttime opening will become even richer with performances of traditional court music beginning Friday including a special performance commemorating the birth of King Sejong the Great. The Korea Heritage Service says it will continue developing programs to help the public better appreciate the historical value and the beauty of the nation's royal palaces. 조영은, 아리랑뉴스.
That brings us to the end of Weekly News Highlights. Thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your weekend.